The Oracle Network.
You are listening to Weird Distractions Podcast, a podcast where we chat true crime, conspiracy theories, paranormal stories, folklore, a little bit of this and a little bit of that to provide you a considerably weird distraction from your everyday life. I'm one of your hosts, Alex.
And Christy.
And this week we are back talking true crime. But as always, before we dive in to the episode itself, we have to discuss what we need a distraction from. So Christy, can you hit us up with what you need a distraction from this week?
Yes. So there's a couple things. First off, I moved to my house. Happy. Great. Love it. It's already homey.
A lovely house. I'm obsessed with it.
Really appreciate Alex helping me move and all. But, so I don't have any internet. It's been a week. And it's been a long week.
It's been a long week.
Not that I depend on it, but...
Kind of depend on it.
My phone bill is already $4 overcharged. Also, we have construction going on.
Ew.
So we have like one X-ray room and the doctors keep ordering stuff and it's just mind-boggling how busy it is. So work really sucks right now.
So you've got internet problems, you're adapting to a new house, and work is an utter
dumpster fire.
Yeah, why does saying the word utter sound really uncomfortable?
You say utter?
Utter. I'm gonna keep this in. Fuck it. We're going live.
Yes.
Anyways, yeah.
Alex, your distractions
my turn. Oh, my turn.
Your turn.
My need for distraction is work also, because people aren't doing well. It's prime time for seasonal depression, so everyone's kind of, not doing well.
Literally sad. SAD.
Yeah, so I need a distraction from the fact that it's just been busy this week. It's been a busy month already, and I've only worked 2 months. I've only worked 2 months. I've only worked 2 weeks out of the month of November, and I feel as if I haven't stopped working since the day I was born. So, yeah, I'm tired.
Oh, you did have a week off at the beginning, didn't you?
I did, and it was glorious, and I wish I could go back, and I can't. So, yay! Working for a living. I hate it so much.
At least you work from home lately, so for the most part.
Yeah, that's true, but it's just...
It still sucks.
It still sucks. But anyways, enough about us. We know what our need for distraction is.
Yes.
Now it's time to actually talk about the distraction.
Yeah, give you guys your distraction now.
Yes. So, apologies in advance. This one is also a bummer. It's a very sad case.
Aren't they always?
Yeah, mostly all of our true crime cases aren't going to be happy. I am looking at doing something in terms of true crime that's not murderous at some point. I just haven't decided what case.
There's non-murderous true crimes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, I don't know, I kind of want to cover like a money laundering case.
Oh, true.
Or, a jewel heist. But I want to do something that either no one else has done yet, or that...
It's not like overly big.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I mean, that's a lot of our episodes, I find. I try to not do the big cases.
The over-glamorized.
Yeah, the ones that get all the spotlights. So, yeah, stay tuned. Bear with us. I'm doing some research. I'm looking into it. But regardless, this week's case involves an unsolved Canadian homicide that took place almost 45 years ago, and it took almost 45 years to identify the victim. But, yeah, I know. But hopefully it won't take as long to identify the killers or killer.
Hope so.
This is the case of Gordon Sanderson, aka Septic Tank Sam.
I can already tell why there was no identification for so long.
Yeah, we'll get to it. So I'm going to give a quick trigger warning as we will be discussing details of torture, which some may find difficult to hear. So as always, listener discretion is advised. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. We need a soundboard. That will be our next investment, I swear.
We're just going literally da-da-da-da, or like Halloween.
Oh yeah, the John Carpenter. I can't even think of it right now, or else I won't get it out of my head. Anyways, let's talk about Gordon Sanderson, shall we?
Please.
So Gordon Edwin Sanderson was born on October 22nd, 1950 in Manitoba. Little is known about his life prior to the tragedy, but what has been made public knowledge is that he was part of the 60s scoop. So in a direct quote from the Canadian Encyclopedia describing the 60s scoop, quote, "The 60s scoop refers to a large-scale removal or scooping of Indigenous children from their homes, communities, and families of birth through the 1960s, and their subsequent adoption into predominantly non-Indigenous middle-class families across the United States and Canada," end quote.
Well, that's depressing.
Yeah, well, and the practice of taking Indigenous children out of their homes did occur prior to this, but things seem to maybe ramp up a bit more around that time period, kind of hence the name. So, the kidnapping of children, let's be real.
Basically, yeah.
Basically, it was kidnapping. Let's not sugarcoat it here. It took place long before the 1960s. But because there was, I don't know, maybe more documentation around the 1960s about it, or what have you, or just more publicly known kidnapping, I don't really know. I'm not 100% sure. Regardless, that's why it's called the 60 scoop.
Gotcha.
Yes, yeah. Not a good look on Canada or the States, or really anywhere that practiced it. So the way that white folks treated and continue to treat Indigenous people.
Yes.
Yeah, our race kind of fucking sucks, I'm not gonna lie.
Disgusting.
Yeah. Anyway, so Gordon was taken away from his family at age 9 and placed into foster care. All we know further is that by the 1970s, he was residing within Edmonton, Alberta, presumably out of the foster care system. According to reports, Gordon had struggled with addictions along with run-ins with police, which, I mean, he's traumatized, obviously. That's my assumption would be.
Well, yeah, you've just been abused your whole life, basically.
Well, yeah.
Since you've been kidnapped.
Well, that's the thing. And, I mean, obviously anyone is going to try, at that point, probably to cope with their trauma with addictions, like with alcohol or other substances.
Oh, yeah, you want to forget it, really. Or numb it in some way you can tolerate it.
Exactly. So, at this point, I can imagine that Gordon, or Gordy, to his friends and family, was more than likely trying to forget the traumatic experience of the 60 scoop, as I just mentioned. However, the trauma wasn't over with. Gordon was heading out to Calgary from Edmonton sometime in 1977, supposedly to visit his younger brother Arthur. Some time had passed and no one reportedly had heard from Gordon, which then brings us to April 13th, 1977. Unidentified human remains were discovered within a septic tank at a former abandoned farmhouse approximately 13 kilometers away from Tofield, Alberta. For our geographical enthusiasts, Tofield is approximately 6 to 8 kilometers east of Edmonton, and before 1865, the area was inhabited largely by Indigenous folks until, we
stole the land.
Yeah, white people came
and
and
kicked them out.
Fucked everything over. The body was discovered when Charlie McLeod, then owner of the property, Charlie owned the property, but they weren't living on the property. It was kind of like just a property of land they had with an abandoned farmhouse on top of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if they were farming on the... It doesn't matter. Anyways, so Charlie finds the body as he was trying to locate the old septic tank for a pump. While investigating, Charlie had noticed a brown shoe attached to a leg sticking out of the muck within the septic tank, according to a CBC News article. The leg was attached to a deceased body, which had been reportedly been wrapped in a yellow bedsheet and bound with nylon rope. Investigators were called in, which one of them described the scene as, quote, one of the most vicious, vindictive, and sadistic crimes that they have ever seen. Yeah. It's not going to get good from here. In terms of what was seen at the scene, for investigators to describe it as such, I'm just going to give another trigger warning because it's going to get graphic. I'm going to use a direct quote, so if you're feeling a little
queasy,
yeah, maybe skip ahead just a little bit. But in a direct quote from the Canadian Unsolved Crimes page, quote, "The body had been tied up and beaten, while the torturers burnt the body using a small butane blowtorch and cigarettes, which were noticeable on the remnants of the victim's clothing. The body had been sexually mutilated, and an autopsy had revealed that they had been shot at least 2 times in the head and chest before being thrown into the septic tank, head first, which was partially filled with water. They were then covered, they being the body, were then covered in limestone or quicklime in the murderer's attempt to dissolve the body, an obvious sense associated with it, thinking that this would speed up the decomposition process," End quote.
So there was just water in the septic tank?
Yeah, so it was just a little bit of water, I think, at the bottom of the septic tank.
Oh. So they were expecting to be filled with other stuff that would break down the body some more.
Yep, and then there was...
I was wondering why there was so much detail still left, but I was like, oh, if there's still skin or whatever going on, then that makes sense.
Yeah, it was, I mean, from what I gathered in my research, it was still pretty mutilated.
Mm-hmm. It was dissolved to bones all.
No. So, however, according to the Canadian Unsolved Crimes page, the attempt to speed up the decomposition process had an actually different effect. Essentially, due to being submerged in quicklime and water, the body became more mummified than decomposed. So, officials believe that the body, now referred to as Septic Tank Sam, had been in the tank for approximately 4 months. However, some speculated that it could have been longer, given it was harder to decipher specifically due to kind of the mummification process of it all, right? Even though the body had been almost preserved in the tank, it was still challenging to identify who Septic Tank Sam was due to the horrifying mutilation the body had encountered, as well as not having any identifying features further that linked up with anyone reported missing at the time. So our previously mentioned friend, Gordon, or Gordy, was not reported missing by friends and family around the time that Septic Tank Sam was discovered, which, before anyone starts pulling judgments or anything, I just want to remind folks that it was a different time where, you know, we weren't as connected as we are now. You know, we don't have, it was the 1970s. People didn't have cell phones. You weren't checking into places.
Young kids would go walk to so-and-so's house concessions away and be like, that's normal. He'll be back for dinner, or he'll be back tomorrow.
Exactly. Because I know when I first read this and was like, well, why didn't anyone report him missing? Because he didn't show up to meet with his brother in Calgary, I think it was. You know, I was like, well, what the heck? Like, why didn't anyone report him missing? But you have to remember, it was a different time. We weren't as connected, and we weren't checking in with one another as much. I mean, I'm not dismissing that they probably weren't worried about him, but...
Yeah, so like you'd be like, oh, let me throw him a text or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And eventually, Gordon's sister Joyce did report her brother missing in the early 1980s, however, wouldn't hear any reports for some time. Mix that all together, on top of the time frame, it somewhat kind of makes sense that maybe they didn't realize Gordon was missing at the time that Septic Tank Sam was, in fact, you know, discovered.
So when was he discovered?
He was discovered April 13th, 1977.
And she didn't report her brother missing until the 80s?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not judging based on timeline for months if he's been missing, but years?
Well, the thing is that apparently Joyce wasn't... I don't know if the family had like a falling out or they just were kind of not talking.
Okay.
But they lost track of one another, basically. Okay. So I think eventually maybe Joyce and Arthur reconnected and they're, you know, oh, like Gordon never showed up, what, you know? Not only that, but he also had interactions with the law prior to this incident. So I don't know if maybe they just assumed that maybe he was in jail or maybe he went somewhere else. It didn't seem like he was, you know, it didn't seem like he had a job at the time. I don't know. This is just my assumption. He didn't have a job at the time. I don't know if he was in a relationship. I don't really know if there was any responsibilities that would keep him to have to follow like a schedule. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't sound great when you say, oh, she didn't report him until the 1980s. But when you kind of look at it with a... But would this be common of him just to kind of go quiet for a bit?
Yeah, you don't know.
Exactly. Not only that, but then investigators, as mentioned, were having a hard time identifying who the person was. So at the time when they found Septic Tank Sam, I don't think anyone put two and two together that it was Gordon right away. So it's not as if they were releasing any hugely identifying clues that maybe would have kind of spoken out towards the family. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, we found him with like this specific jacket. Oh, Gordon was wearing that jacket when he went to, you know, go to see his brother Arthur, and, you know.
Yeah, like the state that he was mummified in and whatnot, that would have made it hard to, again, get distinguishing features other than maybe hair color. I don't know.
Exactly. They did have some things to work off of in terms of potentially identifying the body, as the victim still had all of the teeth, which some of the teeth had fillings in them. This meant that there was potential for someone to perhaps match the teeth through dental records. So medical examiners reportedly sent the victim's dental records to over 800 dental practitioners in Alberta, along with having them published in dental magazines in order to try and identify the body. Unfortunately, this was unsuccessful. Because they weren't able to identify the body as of yet, the body of Septic Tank Sam was sent to be buried in a pauper's grave in Edmonton. That's where he originally was before he went out to Calgary. For those unaware, a pauper's gravesite is for those that are unidentifiable or unclaimed by their relatives. The victim's body would be exhumed in 1979 when Oklahoma forensic pathologist Dr. Clyde Snow became involved in the reconstruction of Sam's skull in order to try and help with the identification.
What year was that?
1979.
Okay.
Dr. Snow was able to take measurements of the skull and bones, which were then placed into a computer program. This computer program shed more of a light of who Septic Tank Sam, aka Gordon, was. Referencing the WTFV article by Kristen Bonnevilian, investigators reported that the body was more than likely male, indigenous, somewhere between 23 and 32 years old, and standing at about 5'10". Even though they weren't able to fully identify who this person was, they were able